As the sun rises over Guyana's capital city, an astonishing transformation is underway, defying all predictions. Amidst the old colonial streets and decaying timber cathedrals, the initial signs of an extraordinary economic boom emerge. Once quiet thoroughfares now pulse with activity, resonating with the sounds of construction and heavy machinery. Formerly unemployed citizens energetically occupy bustling construction sites or speed through town as taxi drivers. Towering cranes oversee the construction of newly built ports, which are immediately inundated with ships. Ambitious infrastructure plans have been set in motion, encompassing expansive gas-fired and hydroelectric power plants, extensive highways linking remote regions and neighboring countries, and a state-of-the-art deep water port to meet insatiable global demand. Substantial funding increases aim to overhaul the healthcare and education systems, aspiring to make them the best in the region. Remarkably, hundreds of thousands of individuals are projected to escape poverty within a mere few years. This exceptional development is propelled by an unparalleled surge in economic growth. Indeed, Guyana's economy skyrocketed by a staggering 57.8% in 2022, surpassing the performance of all other countries worldwide. Within just 5 years, Guyana plans to become the wealthiest nation in South America, with a projected GDP per capita comparable to that of Italy. However, these achievements are unique for Guyana, a country that has historically been renowned more for economic inefficiency than success. Just a few years ago, it was among the most underdeveloped and stagnant nations in South America. High unemployment plagued the population, with nearly half living in poverty. Education, healthcare, and infrastructure were almost non-existent, crumbling under decades of neglect. Additionally, decades of ethnically divided and acrimonious politics compounded the suffering endured by the people of Guyana, leaving little hope for imminent change. In light of this ongoing miracle, several questions arise. Why was Guyana initially plagued by poverty? How is it progressing at such an incredible pace? And is this seemingly unparalleled success too good to be true? During the 16th century, as Spanish explorers sought to exploit various regions in South America, they largely overlooked one particular area known at the time as the Wild Coast. This region, now recognized as Guyana, was disregarded due to its perceived lack of resources. Instead, it was the Dutch who eventually settled in the area, which forms the basis of the modern nation of Guyana. The coastal mudflats and expansive estuaries of Guyana proved to be ideal for cultivating sugarcane. To support the industry's growth, tens of thousands of African slaves were imported annually, reaching a peak in 1833 with over 100,000 active slaves, representing 60% of the colony's entire population. By this time, Guyana had become a British colony. In 1838, slavery was abolished through British colonies, causing seismic disruption in the sugar industry, which had become a significant part of Guyana's economy. Facing the looming extinction of their industry, Guyana's plantation owners sought alternative sources of labor. Given the unappealing nature of the brutal and demanding work, they turned to employing indentured servants from other British colonies, with a significant majority coming from India. These servants would enter into contracts to work for 5 years, receiving food, housing, and a one-way passage to the colony in return. From the end of slavery until 1917, nearly 250,000 indentured Indian servants were brought to British Guyana, now Guyana. This historical pattern contributes to the division that exists in modern Guyana, with two dominant ethnic groups: the Indo-Guyanese, who are disproportionately engaged in agriculture and rural areas, and the Afro-Guyanese, who comprise the majority of the nation's urban population. As the 20th century began, Guyana discovered a new valuable resource. With the world exploring the various uses of aluminum, Guyana found abundant quantities of the ore used to produce it, called bauxite. In fact, Guyana's bauxite reserves were so extensive that by the 1960s, despite being a relatively small nation, it became the world's 4th largest producer. However, the country's heavy reliance on exporting raw resources and its colonial status meant that Guyana's vast wealth was largely exploited without significant improvements in the quality of life for its people. But as the world entered a new era of decolonization following the end of the Second World War, the people of Guyana hoped for a chance to take control of their own destiny. In 1953, Guyana achieved universal adult suffrage. However, with the election of Cheddi Jagan, who was perceived as being too sympathetic to communism, the British temporarily suspended the constitution and deployed troops. Simultaneously, Jagan's party, the PPP, experienced internal divisions along ethnic lines, leading to Forbes Burnham, a leader of the Afro-Guyanese-dominated PNC, coming to power. This sparked violent ethnic riots that further polarized the nation. During the Cold War era, the United States supported the perceived less communist PNC, and combined with an election marred by unfairness. Forbes Burnham took power and led Guyana to independence in 1966. However, despite gaining political independence, Guyana remained economically dependent. A significant portion of the economy was owned by large foreign companies, with one example being Booker McConnell, a British-based company that controlled 85% of the nation's sugar production, which accounted for 1/3 of the economy, 13% of the workforce, and nearly 40% of Guyana's foreign exchange earnings. Additionally, 2 American and Canadian bauxite mining companies accounted for an additional 45% of the nation's export earnings. Many Guyanese argued that these companies not only exploited the nation's resources, but also actively hindered its development due to their overwhelming influence over the economy. Despite gaining independence, Guyana still faced significant challenges in achieving true economic autonomy. Over the years, efforts were made to address these issues and reduce dependence on foreign companies. Guyana sought to diversify its economy and attract foreign investment in various sectors. The government implemented policies to encourage local entrepreneurship and foster domestic industries. Efforts were made to develop infrastructure, improve healthcare and education systems, and create employment opportunities. One major development was the recognition of Guyana's vast potential in the oil and gas sector. In recent years, significant offshore oil reserves were discovered, opening up new possibilities for economic growth and prosperity. The government, in collaboration with international powers, worked to ensure responsible exploration and extraction of these resources, aiming to maximize the benefits for the country and its people. Furthermore, Guyana actively sought to strengthen regional and international partnerships. It became a member of several trade organizations and sought to establish mutually beneficial agreements with neighboring countries and global partners. These initiatives aim to enhance trade, attract investments, and foster economic cooperation. While progress has been made, challenges still persist. Guyana continues to face issues such as income inequality, poverty, and inadequate infrastructure in some areas. Efforts are being made to address these challenges through targeted social programs, infrastructure development projects, and inclusive economic policies. Despite the complexities and obstacles, Guyana's transformation from a disregarded region to a nation with significant economic potential is remarkable. The journey from colonization to independence, coupled with the discovery of valuable resources, has shaped the nation's history and set the stage for ongoing efforts to achieve sustainable and inclusive development. As Guyana moves forward, the focus remains on harnessing its resources, promoting diversified industries, empowering its people through education and skill development, and ensuring that economic growth benefits all segments of society. With strategic planning, effective governance, and strong partnerships, Guyana aims to realize its vision of becoming a prosperous and self-reliant nation offering a bright future for its citizens. Despite the hopes of the US and UK, Forbes Burnham agreed in 1970 to declare Guyana a socialist cooperative republic. This meant that the government would require a minimum ownership stake of 51% in any business venture. The intention was to limit foreign control over the economy while still allowing for necessary foreign expertise, management experience, and investment. However, foreign companies rejected the idea of shared ownership and refused to comply with the requirements. Consequently, over the next decade, the government proceeded to nationalize major foreign-owned companies, eventually gaining control over 80% of the economy. Initially, these efforts seemed successful as elevated global sugar and bauxite prices allowed the government to increase spending and drive economic growth. However, in the early 80s, the favorable commodity prices that had supported Guyana's economy declined sharply. Despite this, the government continued to increase spending and resorted to accumulating international debt to finance its agenda. The result was an economic downturn, exacerbated by the fact that nationalizing major corporations meant losing skilled foreign management teams and a steady supply of investment. As a consequence, productivity declined, and key industries such as bauxite, sugar, and rice production experienced significant drawbacks. These sectors represented a vast majority of the economy and foreign currency earnings. Instead of addressing the root issues, the government accumulated more debt and imposed stringent currency controls to avoid a financial crisis. Conditions deteriorated rapidly, leading to a mass exodus of 72,000 people, approximately a tenth of Guyana's population, between 1976 and 1981. As the government continued to accrue debt, reaching more than 6 times the GDP, funds were diverted away from productive investments like infrastructure, health, and education, further exacerbating the nation's living standards and making it increasingly difficult to repay debts in the future. By the late 1980s, faced with the imminent risk of bankruptcy and immense pressure from the international community, the Guyanese government implemented an ambitious economic recovery program. This program dismantled the socialist economy, ended self-imposed isolation, and eventually privatized significant portions of the state-owned sector. Supported by IMF-backed austerity measures, Guyana managed to avoid a catastrophic collapse. Simultaneously, in 1992, fair elections resulted in Indo-Guyanese leader Cheddi Jagan assuming power. Unlike decades earlier, Jagan now supported democratization and economic reform. However, the subsequent 23-year rule of Indo-Guyanese government was marred by nepotism, corruption, widespread smuggling, and organized crime. The lack of opportunities led to a massive brain drain, with 80% of skilled workers leaving the country. Additionally, an over-reliance on raw resource exports hindered development, while infrastructure, education, and healthcare continued to be neglected. Adding to the challenges, bitter and ethnically polarized politics further undermined stability and the effectiveness of the system. By the mid-2010s, Guyana ranked as the third poorest nation in South America, with 40% of the population living in poverty and the highest suicide rate globally. It appeared that numerous obstacles hindered substantial improvements, leaving citizens to endure severe hardships or seek opportunities elsewhere. However, in 2015, a game-changing discovery altered Guyana's trajectory. Oil was found offshore after 80 years of speculation and 7 years of exploratory drilling. ExxonMobil's exploration revealed an abundance of oil beneath Guyana's coastal shelf, with the region accounting for 2/3 of the world's total oil discoveries in the past 7 years. Within a short period, Guyana transformed from having 0 estimated oil reserves to possessing 11.2 billion barrels, valued at nearly $1 trillion. Pumping only began in late 2019. Yet, by 2027, Guyana is projected to be producing over 1 million barrels a day, making it the producer of oil in the world on a per capita basis, dwarfing the outputs of Saudi Arabia, Norway, the UAE, Qatar, and Kuwait. Taking notes from Venezuela's economic chaos over the past 50 years, Guyana has implemented several measures to avoid a similar fate. Firstly, it has devised a plan to allocate a significant portion of its oil revenue towards highly productive investments. One key focus is the substantial improvement of the educational system by enhancing its quality and capacity, with the ultimate goal of making education free for all. Simultaneously, Guyana is actively revamping its healthcare system to transform into a net exporter of healthcare services to the region. This strategic move aims to generate foreign currency earnings while significantly improving the health and productivity of its citizens. In addition to these initiatives, Guyana has historically faced challenges due to its harsh climate and geography. With dense forests covering 87% of the country, building and maintaining infrastructure becomes more expensive and arduous. However, with the windfall of oil revenue, Guyana intends to construct an intensive network of roads and highways. This infrastructure development not only aims to connect cities and remote regions within the country, but also to establish better connections with neighboring nations. Alongside this, the construction of a new deep water port will enhance the nation's cargo capacity. The overarching goal of these projects is to reduce transportation costs, shorten transit times, and enhance Guyana's economic competitiveness. Perhaps the most pivotal step Guyana has taken to improve productivity is its investment in massive energy projects. These projects include the establishment of hydroelectric power plants, solar farms, and critically, a 300-megawatt gas-fired power plant. With the addition of a new oil pipeline, Guyana will leverage its own oil production to significantly reduce energy prices. This will make the transition to value-added manufacturing more feasible, resulting in increased revenue generation and improved employment opportunities. Furthermore, Guyana is making progress towards becoming a service economy, with the focus on call centers and IT, leveraging its advantages as the only English-speaking South American nation. However, the most crucial action Guyana has undertaken to avoid following Venezuela's path is the establishment of a sovereign wealth fund with strict rules governing saving and spending. This substantial investment fund ensures that all government oil revenues are channeled into it and sets stringent guidelines on annual expenditure. The fund's design aims to prevent the economy from being flooded with excessive money too quickly, thereby avoiding hyperinflation of the exchange rate. Moreover, it provides a buffer against short-term fluctuations in oil prices while securing savings and investments for future generations. If all these efforts unfold as planned, Guyana stands a good chance of becoming a highly prosperous nation within a few years. However, the success of these endeavors heavily relies on the ability of Guyana's political institutions to remain stable and intact. Unfortunately, the country has a history of corruption and inefficiency within its government and politics. Moreover, the ethnic polarization within the nation further undermines its stability. This situation is likely to result in the formulation of unsound economic policies aimed at garnering votes. For instance, there may be financial support for state-owned sugar plantations to appeal to Indo-Guyanese voters, despite the drain on resources. Under the current president, Irfan Ali, such instances have already occurred multiple times. Observers from outside express concerns that the relative lack of transparency in the wealth fund could potentially facilitate less than ideal use of the oil revenue. Furthermore, Guyana's weak law enforcement, property rights, and contract enforcement hinder foreign investment in sectors beyond mining and oil. Additionally, the country faces a race against time to capitalize on its oil reserves. Estimates suggest that global oil consumption will peak in less than a decade, which would substantially diminish Guyana's revenue potential thereafter. To navigate these challenges, Guyana needs to expedite oil extraction while simultaneously diversifying its economy and investing in its people. It must also ensure that its institutions are not swayed by greed amidst the influx of cash pouring into the country. Although current efforts seem promising, it is still too early to ascertain their long-term impact, and history has shown that nations in similar circumstances have faced adverse outcomes.